You guys are in for an absolute treat. Brie Schmidt, she is absolutely crushing it. She's the managing broker of Second City Real Estate, and she runs an amazing event on June 1st and June 2nd. You will not want to miss it. It is literally the best real estate event I have attended here in the Midwest. It's called the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, and it's June 1st and June 2nd, so make sure to mark your calendars. And if you put my name, Josh, you will get a discount on your tickets. So just put my name there. And but Brie, she's absolutely crushing it. She has rental properties in Chicago. She has rental properties in Wisconsin. I believe she's around 90 units. She just sold some of them, so we're not even sure. It's a good problem to have. But she's not coming up unless you guys give her a ton amount of energy. So everybody, please put your hands together for Brie Schmidt.
Apparently I didn't need coffee before I came. Hi, my name is Brie Schmidt. Like Josh said, I'm the managing broker of Second City Real Estate. I'm also a landlord. I own just under 100 units in the Chicago and Milwaukee market. I'm also the co-founder of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. I'm also the CEO of TurnkeyReviews.com, which is a website business for out-of-state investors, and I run a monthly meetup. So I do a lot of things within real estate, and that's kind of why I wanted to come talk to you today. Was because, I quit my job in 2014. A lot of people have that goal of, quitting their corporate job, making it in real estate. I'm gonna be a lifestyle investor. I'm gonna do the things that I wanted to do. And it took me a couple of years to realize that I wasn't actually having that time. I was actually working more hours doing real estate than I ever was working corporate. And it wasn't until I met my now husband. We were dating for a couple of weeks. And I remember we were watching TV or something. And he's like, God, your life sucks. And I was just like, I'm sorry. Like, what do you mean? My life is awesome. I've created my life, right, around what I wanted. And he's like, your damn phone goes off every 5 minutes, right? You're always like interrupting what you're doing to be on your phone. You bring your phone to the dinner table. This is just not working out for me. If this is what you think that life is gonna be like, you're around 24/7 with clients, then this isn't gonna work out for us. And it took him saying that to me to really realize, like, wow, you're right. I'm spending all of my time 24/7 doing real estate, and where's my me time? So we implemented house rules. Our house rules are no phone calls after 7, no texts, emails, anything after 7. Even if I'm texting a friend, after about 3 minutes, he's like, who is that? What are you doing? It's after 7, this is our time. Nothing on Sundays either, that's also our time. One of the things that he got me into was we take motorcycle rides every Sunday. And one of the things I love about that is no one can call me, right? I'm on the motorcycle, I can't take phone calls. And it's been one of the greatest, most liberating things. So that's where I am now, but let's start with where I started. So I started back in 2011, and I did a house hack. So if you're not familiar with what house hacking is, I used an FHA loan, which is 3.5% down, to buy a 3-flat property, lived in one unit, rent out the others. Back then, it was very easy to do this and then have your tenants pay your entire mortgage. Nowadays, with price points, that's just not realistic to have tenants cover your expenses. But it was a really great thing. I think our mortgage was $2,200, and the rent that we brought in from our 2 units was $2,400. We brought a new gut rehabbed property, right? So we were able to bank one income, which was my first husband's income, and then we took my income for investments. It took us about 18 months of saving, living for free. We bought a second property, then we bought another property after that, and we did a renovation. So we did the BRRRR strategy, which people have probably heard of, just buy, renovate, all that, refinance, repeat. So we took a property that had not been touched since about the 1960s, completely renovated it, and then did a cash out refinance on it, took that money, and then we decided what to do with it. And it was at that point where I think a lot of investors are, if they're doing what I've done, which is, everyone's got a goal of retirement, right? For us, the number was $10,000 a month gross rental income. Couldn't really do that in Chicago very long. You can do it, a couple times in Chicago, especially on the north side, but after that, when you're looking at the numbers of, hey, it's gonna take me X amount of capital to get to $10,000 a month gross rental income, you have to have a lot of capital to be able to buy that many buildings, to have that sort of return, and be able to retire. So at that point, we looked at going into 3 different markets. We looked at Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Milwaukee. What I did is I went to each of those markets and looked for referrals for investor agents. And went to each market and said, I found 3 different agents in each market, and said, hey, I want to buy $500,000 of property tomorrow. As an investor, where should I buy and why? And followed them around for the day, and they took me to different neighborhoods, different areas, different properties, and explained to me like, hey, I would buy in this market because of these reasons. It was through that I kind of learned what worked for me. Now, I think everyone's goal in real estate is different, right? You have to learn what works for you. What works for you doesn't necessarily work for me. So one of the things people always ask me, like, hey, what neighborhood do you buy in? Because that's where I want to buy. And my response is always, cool, do you want to buy my car? Because that's the car I have. Like, just because I have that kind of car doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So there is no right or wrong way to do this. Understand that, please. But I ended up in the Milwaukee market. I liked it because it was dense. It was a dense urban environment like Chicago. You know, Indianapolis and Kansas City are suburban single-family markets. I really understood the being close to downtown, being close to transit sort of thing. So I bought, within 9 months, I bought 18 properties, just 55 units, and then I started working with partners and bought another 10 properties in the next 9 months. So it was a very aggressive growth plan. Hit my goal of investing. My goal was $35,000 a month gross rental income. We did that in May of 2015, and then I started working with partners and increased those numbers. So that's when I quit my job. I did this full time. Everything sounded great, right? Man, you're making all this money in real estate, but then what, right? After you actually buy the properties, right, how do you manage them? So one of the things that I learned is that I actually don't like managing properties. I like buying them, right? For me, the high is the analyzing. The analyzing the deals, the strategy, right? Figuring out, hey, like, you know, what can I do with this property? What's my exit gonna be? If I make these improvements, my return's gonna be this. But when it comes to like day-to-day management of tenants, I absolutely hate it. So I learned very early on that I decided to get management. So my Milwaukee portfolio was, from day one, started off with management, right? And we were talking during the introductions, you know, when you're doing any sort of C-type market, I think any sort of market, people need to understand what are your personal goals, right? And where is that line of making money versus spending money, right? So if it takes you 10 hours a week to manage a property, right, what is that time worth to you versus what you can pay someone else to do it, right? And it depends on other people. Is like Milwaukee, I hire that out, hands down. My Chicago portfolio, I still self-manage it, right? I've looked at the numbers and how many hours I'm spending managing that property and what it would cost me to hire a property manager, and I would be paying them like $200 an hour for what I do. Now, Milwaukee, I think I pay them like 25 cents an hour, to be honest, for all the work they have to do. But that's part of being an investor, right? And part of analyzing, right, where's my time being spent? So I had my own in-house management team. I had developed my own in-house property manager. After a year and a half, I fired him and hired outside management. So I went opposite of what a lot of people do. A lot of people start with in-house with a third-party vendor and then develop their own in-house team once they get to as many units as I have. For me, it was, again, a cost-benefit analysis, right? I'm part of a system of people. I don't just have one guy I'm relying on. I have 10, right? And it's costing me, yes, a little bit more money, but at this point of our relationship, I've been with my property manager for 3.5 years. They send me reports every month. I review the reports. I send them an email with questions. They respond to my questions. We talk next month. It's pretty much what happens, right? Because the reality of being an investor, and one of the things that took me a while to learn, right? Rule number 1 of being a lifestyle investor, in my opinion, is stop giving a fuck, right? You have to really stop giving a fuck about a lot of things. Because people get so upset in some of these details, like, hey, our furnace went out Saturday night, you know, and it's gonna cost us X amount of dollars. What are you gonna do? It went out, it's broken, it's middle of winter. You know, you can bitch and moan and cry about it, but the reality is the furnace needs to get fixed. And the reality is nothing's open on Sunday. So now you've got to call a specialist, right, who's going to charge you triple for the part because it's Sunday morning. But there's laws, there's rules about not having heat. So understanding, right, what your goals are, what your time cost benefit analysis is, will make you a better investor. And I wish I would have done that from the beginning and then focused everything else around that. Sorry, I've got notes here to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So once I had the portfolio, I have not bought a property since 2016. My portfolio was set. I really had no interest in growing any further. We had enough work on our hands to do what we needed to do. The market also was getting more expensive. We just decided to stop buying. So there's different phases of investors. The first one for me, 2011 to 2015, was the growth phase. 2016 to 2018 was the stabilization phase, right? So this is when we went into properties and looked at, you know, we've had long-term tenants, right? What can we get if we spend $10,000 repairing the kitchen and bathroom, right? What can our rent increase be? We went through kind of all of our properties and looked at, you know, what's the cost-benefit analysis of this? So my rule is 8 years, right? If I can get paid back in 8 years, it makes sense for me to do it. If I can't get paid back in 8 years, then we'll just leave it. I've got units with tenants that have been there for 14 years. We bought those tenants and they've still been in there. And hey, if I went in there and rehabbed it, I could probably increase rents by, you know, 140%. But at the end of the day, the cost of that rehab, because they've been there for 14 years, it's like everything needs to be done. Doesn't make any sense for me as an investor. So we went through a growth phase or a stabilization phase throughout that. Part of that was also within my other businesses was working on my own time. So I said my goal personally is to work 30 hours a week and to take off 2 months a year. I'm very happy that for the last 2 years I've been able to maintain that goal. It takes a lot of work to do that. So some of the things that I've done to reach those goals was one, my to-do list, right? It said I've got 5 businesses. And they're all very reactive, right? I could think my day is going great. I've got a really light day. I don't have a lot to do. With the brokerage business, you know, 5 new properties came in the market. We have to go see them today. With the landlord business, you know, we had someone back into our property and knock the whole foundation off of the wall. Or someone blew up our garage. Or the furnace goes out. There's shit that happens, right? The blowing up of the garage, like I was in Europe. I got a video from I was in Rome, and I got a video from my property manager of my garage like literally on fire. This chick caught her boyfriend cheating on her, and went and got those red things of gas and dumped it on his car in our garage and literally blew it up. So like, you know, what are you going to do? Stop giving a fuck. Like, I'm in Rome, A, right? I've actually had 2 fires, and both times I was out of town. So what am I gonna do? B, the thing is already on fire, right? So there's nothing I can do. So really, it's just email the insurance guy and then deal with it when I get back. But why stress about that kind of stuff? I used to stress about so much of that stuff, and it consumed so much of my time. So working on time management was a really big deal for me. Number one is understanding what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing within all of my businesses. So one of the things that I still do, which people think is crazy, is I still do all of my accounting, right? I could very easily hire a VA at $5 an hour to do all of my accounting. So my PM sends me reports, but they only have rents and repairs. They don't pay my mortgage, they don't pay my utilities, they don't pay my insurance, right? So that all has to be put into another system, right, for that to be then analyzed. Then I've got my properties I self-manage, right? That takes accounting as well. I've got my brokerage business, the summit business, the website business, all that has accounting. So every 2 weeks I have about 200 to 250 transactions that need to be accounted for, allocated, and tagged. I still do it all. One of the reasons though is I want to know what's going on in my business, right? There's a lot of people that will talk about, hey, the way to systemize in a process is to delegate, right? And delegation is great in a lot of capacities, but it's not great in all the capacities. So we just had this happen with my property manager where I got a bill for replacing tile floor in my kitchen of one of my coach houses and one of my 100 units that I own, right? And my response to them was, didn't we replace that tile a year ago? And they're like, oh shit, yeah, we did, we double billed you. Like, I know that because I do my own accounting, right? If I was just reading through a report, there's no way I'd be able to catch those kind of errors. I'm also on top, it makes me on top of what's going on in my properties. I'm noticing who's paying rent and when, who's always late, right? So if they're always late, I know that when something comes up, that lets me decide if I'm going to evict them or not. You know, we've got tenants we just had a tenant who just paid 4 months rent in advance because they were behind 4 months in rent. They've been with us for like 5 years, right? And I know this lady, like she's gotten behind a couple of times, but then she always gets back up. So I didn't even bother filing eviction on her. But again, I knew her history because I've been putting her history into my own accounting system every single month for the last 4 years. So understanding on what you're good and you're not good at. You know, those are things I'm good at. Things I am not good at would be anything marketing or creative. There's websites like Fiverr or Upwork, right, where you can hire people, consultants, to do this kind of stuff for you very, very easily. The time it takes me to probably explain what I want is longer than it takes them to actually do it, because they know exactly, like, they know how to, man, it's crazy what they do. I'm always on those websites doing stuff with them. But really understanding it. So I write down a list. What I did was I wrote down where I was spending my time every single week, right? And I did it for the first week, I just wrote down every day. You know, today's Monday, I worked 10 hours today. What did I do in those 10 hours, right? I spent, you know, 2 hours doing this and 3 hours doing this. I just kind of kept track, and every week I reflected. It took me about 3 or 4 months to do this. Reflected like, man, I'm spending a lot of time doing this. I hate doing that. You know, and whenever I see that coming up on my to-do list, I always procrastinate doing that. How do I not do that anymore, right? And really just, it took me, the first 3 months was just writing everything down, and then noticing the obvious things. And then really focusing on, okay, these are the only things that I'm going to do, and these are the things that I'm not going to do. People always talk to you about spending your time doing revenue generating things, right? I try to spend 80% of my time doing revenue generating things and 20% of my time doing non-revenue generating things, right? What makes you money? Not only that, but what makes you happy, right? So understanding skill sets is really, really important, and systems within your process, systems and processes within your businesses. And they're all different. So going back to the not giving a fuck part of things, the other part of that is I stopped taking in-person meetings. That was one of the best things I've ever done. So depends on, you know, sometimes people give me really bad reactions, like, hey, let's meet for coffee. My answer is always no, absolutely not. Not even gonna consider meeting me for coffee, right? It's a waste of my time. And I usually explain, like, listen, it's not a good use of my time. And 90% of the time they push back and like, well, explain that. And I do. Listen, I work from home. I don't wear makeup every day. I really, like, my hair's in a ponytail. For me to have to get up and shower in the morning, and then put on makeup, and then go drive to meet you, you know, like, that's just a lot of work for me. I just really don't want to do that, right? But if I set it up as a phone call, right, I can be in my pajamas. Like, you don't know if I have showered or not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And I have not put on makeup at this point. Like, it's just not happening. So that really helps. But I also find that helps me if people don't respect that, right? If they keep pushing, like, well, I insist on an in-person meeting. Well, great, you're not gonna get it. You know, if you don't respect my time, then you're not gonna respect me as a person, and there's no point of us doing business together. My time is set for, especially for my clients, right? That's where my time should be. My time is working on either doing the important parts of my business or spending time with my clients, because that is revenue generating, right? If you wanna just go out to coffee and chit chat, like, you can call me when I'm driving and we can chit chat, that's cool. But that's been, one of the most impactful parts of my changes has been declining in-person meetings. One of the things I also do is I really block out my times. So every week I have a to-do list. My to-do list is split into my 4 businesses, my 4 main businesses, and then a personal list. I write absolutely everything on the to-do list. There is a book called Getting Things Done. I was too busy to read the book, so I just bought the Cliff Notes. I'm not kidding. But you can get the Cliff Notes version on Kindle, which the premise is this, that we spend so much time mentally trying to remember things, right? Like, we're always, I'm forgetting to do something, right? So I carry a notebook with me everywhere. I write everything down, right? Even if it's send a text or send an email, it always goes on that list, right? I said it's broken into my different businesses. The other part of it too is things that you have to do that are really large projects is to break them down. So like right now for me, taxes. I do my own accounting, I do my own taxes because I'm a nurse, I'm crazy. You know, who does their own 200 pages of taxes? I love it. I absolutely love it. And yes, I've had my genetics tested. There's nothing wrong with me. But that's really daunting, right? And I've got 8 LLCs. You know, like to do those, like to write down and do my taxes, that's kind of like, I'm gonna procrastinate the shit out of that, right? So what I do is I write down, assemble all my documents, right? So it's when all the documents start coming in January, they go in a folder, right? So then the first week of February, my job is to go through that folder and make sure I have everything. Because sometimes it comes through email, sometimes I get it in the mail, right? I go through and make sure like, hey, I've got all my documents, right? Cool. Week 2, my job is to do my business partners LLC returns, which is a 1065. So So I've got 4 of those to do, right? So that's week 2. Week 3 is I do my personal portfolio. Week 4, I do my Milwaukee portfolio. Week 5, I do my personal returns, right? And now I'm doing it only like 3 or 4 hours a week over a 5-week period. But now I'm already in mid-March, and I'm done. I'm actually done a month in advance. But what that does for me is if something comes up that needs my immediate attention, and that week I can't do it, I can push it off to the next week. I have it not be that big of a deal, right? Because I still have that 1 month cushion into things. When I do my work, I also, if you check my calendar is completely blacked out. So that every week, I've got my to-do list, I go through it every Monday morning, and I block off, okay, this is gonna take me 3 hours, right? And this is a paperwork type job. I go through everything and I kind of allocate a time for it and I pick days. So like whenever I've got to do my Milwaukee reporting, that for me is about 6 to 8 hours. That always goes on a day that I have nothing else to do, where I can do it I block off from 8 in the morning till 4 o'clock at night. My phone is completely turned off on Do Not Disturb. My email is not on my computer. I just completely close the windows, and I get treats. I treat myself like a dog, right? So I'm not even kidding. So that I've got 4 different LLCs. There's 4 different reports. I do a report, I get a treat. Sometimes it's ice cream at like 10 o'clock in the morning, right? Or whatever. But I do that. I trick myself into doing these things. And then I do my second report. And between these reports, I stop for half an hour, check my emails, make sure nothing's crazy going on, but then really go back to focusing. So that's really helped me get a lot done. I found that a lot of my time was really just dicking around, right? I would start doing something and then an email would come up and then I would get sidetracked. And I would start doing something else, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, I didn't get to do my stuff. So really, especially the important stuff, I completely block off my time and focus only on that. Like I said, I also don't do in-person meetings. So I do phone calls only. I typically do them 1 or 2 days a week, and I do them back to back. And then once I get in that mode of talking, man, like my husband just laughs at me because I'm walking around the house, usually in my pajamas. Like I'm walking around the house just like from one end to the other, and I'm just talking for hours and hours and hours, and it drives him crazy because I'm always interrupting him in whatever he's doing, watching TV or something. But I do it that way because it gets me in like the zone, right? I'm in the zone for one, I get in the zone for another one. And again, my whole day is now blocked off for these phone calls. That is my focus. I stop in between, I check emails here and there, I add something else to the list, but that's how I progress throughout my day. And then establishing boundaries, like I mentioned before. My phone, typically like my hours are from 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. I don't take client calls on the weekends, I'm usually out doing showings, and I don't take calls on Sundays. That doesn't mean I don't check things, right? But if you email me a question like, hey, what do you think about, investing in Milwaukee? Like that doesn't need me to respond to you on a Sunday. But if you email me or you call me and say, hey, my pipe just broke, what do I do, right? I'm gonna take those sort of phone calls. I see Danielle in the room. Hey, my tenant just was found unconscious in his bathtub on Saturday morning. Like, I'm gonna respond to those sort of things, but if it's not anything that's important, like, it waits till what my office hours are. I've found that to be really interesting in today's modern world of always being available. I've gotten some pushback on that. I've actually had to fire clients before who weren't respectful of my time boundaries. And it was one of the most glorious things I've ever done. It really was. Man, like there's this one client I fired, like he just would always, Friday nights, he would always email me at 8 o'clock at night, 8, 9 o'clock on a Friday night, like I wanna see these properties tomorrow. It's Chicago, buildings are tenant occupied, most of them need 24 hours notice. So you can't tell me on Friday night that you wanna see properties on Saturday. And then he'd always call me on Saturday and be like, well, I wanna add these other properties to the list. And finally one day I'm like, listen, this is not working out. Like I've explained to you multiple times that I need to know by Thursday afternoon what you want to see for the weekend. And if you can't respect that, you should find another agent. It's as simple as that. And I remember I came home and my husband's like, what is with that smile on your face? Like, remember that pain in the ass? Like I fired him, and like he high-fived me and it was great. But you have to do that. People are scared to say no today, right? And it's bullshit. So you have to be, I'm an asshole with my time, I'm sorry. But that's what it takes, right, for me to be able to work 30 hours a week and take off 2 months out of the year, right? I have to be. So establishing those boundaries, but most people are very respectful of that. Really, like, People will call me on Sunday, and I just say, can this wait till morning or business hours because it's Sunday with my family? Oh, of course it will. But it's having the guts to kind of say those things. And 90% of the time, people are actually very, very respectful. So that's kind of like the stabilization phase of things. So now my business, as of last year, has been actually quite stable. I'm down to solid 30 hours a week. I took off 2 months the last 2 years. Now what, right? Now what do I do with myself? And now I'm in a different phase of what I would call optimization. So what I did last year, so Josh mentioned our event coming up in June. These events they just started in Chicago, but these events have been going on for a few years now throughout the United States. I attend a lot of them actually. And I was in one of the events in Philly. So the structure kind of is all the speakers, after we're done speaking at the events, we usually donate something to charity. We do a charity auction. So with Chicago, our charity auction is Search for Water, which my partner's on the board, as well as Facing Forward, which is a local Chicago charity to end homelessness. So a lot of times speakers will give up their time, right? That's a common thing. So we had this economist come up on stage, I remember, and he's talking about big words I don't understand. I'm just writing these things down. Like, I understand real estate trends, but I don't understand economic trends and why that impacts my world of real estate. It's one of my goals this year was to be a lot better about those sort of things, to be able to talk intelligently about them. So when he came up for this charity auction, I was like, damn, I'm gonna buy this guy's time. So it turns out he's not only an economist in the market, but he specializes in real estate, and he specializes in real estate advisement. So what he did is I took all my whole entire portfolio and looked at the last 5 years of data and put it all into this spreadsheet for me of what my properties were delivering. Not only my initial cash on cash, what my IRR was, what I could sell them for, what my return on investment would be. So it was actually a really interesting exercise for me, and it showed me that 60% of my portfolio is good. The properties are stabilized, right? They're running optimally, right? There's not really any room for improvement. My returns are great on my initial investment, and hey, if I sold them, I'd get a couple of years cash flow up front, but it wouldn't be a home run, right? Then I've got about 20% of my properties, which I would call the duds, right? They're either constantly having turnover year over year. If I sold them, I would be getting my money back and then some, but it would cost me. So one of them we looked at it as my trigger was how many years of cash flow up front. Because this property had been performing so poorly over the last 5 years, if I sold it, I would get 12,000 years upfront cash flow. That's how much it would be. So I put 20% of my portfolio I'm starting to sell. I just sold 3 buildings. I just put 2 in the market yesterday, and I think I've got another 4 more to go. So I'm just selling off my duds, right? I'm skimming off the crap. And then I've got 20%, which is an interesting position where they're cash flowing great. The issue though is that they have improved so much as far as the value, right? So I actually brought an example for you guys tonight because I don't know what to do with it, right? So this is the property I bought for $55,000, right? I put $11,000 down payment on it, and over the last 5 years, including all capital improvements, I cash flow $5,000 a month, or $5,000 a year. So with an $11,000 initial investment, $5,000 a year, my cash on cash is 45%, right? On my acquisition, my cap rate is a 14.75. So killing it, right? Anyone in Chicago would take those kind of numbers. So why even consider selling it? The issue though is I could sell it for $120, and my loan on it is $41,000. So even after closing costs and capital gains, I would net 50 grand cash. That's 10 years upfront cash flow. So what do you do? That's a legit question. I don't know what to do. So now that's my current problem is what do you do when you're in this position, right? Especially if you're buying on the north side of Chicago. The properties here, or at least where my clients buy, they're solid, okay cash flow, but they've got appreciation potential, right? So at what point do you sell these properties, right? At what point does the cash flow not be enough for what the equity is sitting in the properties? And then what do you do with the money, right? I think that's everyone's question these days, with the market being as tight as it is what do you do with that money? I don't have the answers to that. So I thought I would open it up to suggestions of what would you do with what you're currently looking to invest in. Anyone? Yeah.
Certain areas of Milwaukee are those opportunity zones that way you have to be.
Great point. Opportunity zones. Does anyone not know what opportunity zones are? Cool. So opportunity zones are areas like, so if I sell this property, right, I've got to do a couple of things. Either A, I pay taxes on it, capital gains tax is 15%, so I pay capital gains tax on it, and then I can do whatever I want with my money. Or I can 1031 it, which means I'm making a trade. 1031 though, I have to, within 45 days, I've got to set a list, identify properties, and I've got to close within 45 days. So you're on kind of a time crunch, right? You have to hopefully time the market where you can sell it and then find another investment. The problem though is for this kind of property, if I sell it, right, I'm getting a 14.75% cap rate. There's no way in hell I'm gonna get that sort of cap rate if I do sell it. But using opportunity zones, you can reinvest that cash into an opportunity zone. After a certain period of years, then you actually get your whole capital gains absolved. So with a 1031, you're rolling your capital gains in, but then when you sell it, at some point, if you're gonna sell it, you're still paying those capital gains. You're just deferring it, you're not getting rid of it. But opportunity zones are a great option. Yeah?
I would say, since you don't want to put so much time, passively invest that money in somebody else, train somebody, and then get them up to speed, eventually kind of, I guess, kind of delegating.
Yeah, great. So his response was to invest passively with either someone else, whether that be a fund, they have got established funds that you can invest your money in, or to train someone else. Said the energy runs out, right? I've been doing this for almost 8 years. I'll go back real quick. So I remember when I first started, especially with Milwaukee, you know, I was this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed little blonde girl skipping through Milwaukee, asking everyone who wants to sell me their house. That's what I did. I literally asked people on the street, I asked postmen, right? Like, I made sure everyone in my little nook that I was buying in, everyone knew I was looking to buy houses. I stopped people like eating their lunch, I'm not even kidding. And I always asked questions. So one of the things I did, which I found very interesting, is I always asked sellers, I called them after we sold, so like, you know, we're done, and asked them, why did you sell? You know, and I found one of 3 things. Either A, they ran it like a business, right, and they were trading up. So I've had actually a couple of different sellers, I bought a couple of properties from them. Like, hey, they were looking to get in hotels, they were looking to get in a large-scale multifamily, they were looking to get into assisted living facilities, they had already built their portfolio, they were trading up. Those are my favorites to buy from, because they ran it like a business, right? And then there was the small landlord who had built a pretty sizable portfolio locally, you know, 8, 15, somewhere in their properties, and they wanted to retire. And it was always 10 years. How long have you been doing this? And they always said 10 years. I was like, I'm never gonna sell. I'm never gonna retire. And now that I'm 8 years in, like, hell yeah, it's really exhausting. It really is. Especially when you've got almost 100 tenants, man, like, it's always something. That goes back to not giving a fuck. Like, you just can't. Every month it's something, right? Every month someone's not paying. Every month someone's doing something, right? And it's just, you just gotta get over the bullshit. The other reason was they did not know what they were doing. They bought a bad investment, they ran it like shit, they ran it into the ground, and now they're looking for a fire sale. And I definitely try to avoid those properties at all costs. But yeah, there's definitely lots of options with training other people into other businesses too. I think that there's a lot of technology that is very interesting to me, and investing into that sort of field, technology within real estate. If anyone doesn't know, there's a really cool, I think it's cool, Click Invest is the company. We're having them come speak at the summit as well, where they do data analytics and underwriting on flip projects throughout the entire Chicagoland market. And that's their bread and butter, and I've seen what they do, and I think it's awesome. So investors don't even look at properties, because they're so keyed in on what they're doing that just through a computer program, you're able to look online, look at their scope of work, and then make an offer without ever actually seeing the property, because they're so accurate. So that's all really cool stuff that I find very interesting. Anyone else? Yeah? Yeah, I could sell the properties, put them in a Roth IRA, and become a hard money lender. I've done a few hard money lendings. Currently, the one that I'm having problems with was supposed to be due last February, and I've had to go to court and do a judgment against them, and it was someone that I'd known for years through these meetup groups. So my husband is very, very against hard money lending because we're still out tens of thousands of dollars on this house that's been on the market for a year. Sucks. That's one of the perils of being in this business. You know, it's not all, you're not always going to make money.
See if you can get a conventional equity loan on it. If you can sell for 120, you make a lend on something like that.
That's another option. It's a
You get more than 50.
great point. His point was to cash out refinance. So this is a commercial asset, so the world of commercial is a little bit different than the world of residential. But yeah, I could do a cash out refinance. The question though, and this is where people need to understand, so for me to do a cash out refinance, right, my rate resets anyways this summer, or next year I think. So it's gonna cost me 5.5% on a commercial loan, right, to take out more money. So what can I do, where can I put my money now to at least get 5.5%? Right, because if I'm spending, if the money is costing me 5.5%, I should be getting hopefully at least 10% on my money, right? Otherwise, it's just not a good deal for me. So understanding that capacity, right? What money costs you, not only was your time and what your activities cost you, and then how are you going to get that return, right? I think one of the biggest problems investors have, at least me, is having money, right? Having money is a problem for me because as an investor, it's sitting in my stupid account at 0.001% interest, right? It's just sitting there, right? And I want to spend it, right? I want to be putting my money to work for me. And that's hard in this sort of market where deals aren't coming up every single day. Cool, well, thanks for the ideas. Now I'll open up to any other questions about other stuff. Anyone have? Initially, why Milwaukee over the other markets? It was really just a personal thing. I said the other markets were mainly single-family suburban markets, and I didn't really understand them. I understood, like, Milwaukee's a lot like Chicago. They hate when you say that, but it's true. It's like literally just a small mini footprint of Chicago. So I invest, like the market that I invested in is pretty similar to, like, let's say Logan Square 10 years ago. It's just on the dividing, like, it's on the one side of the highway is the cool, hip, you know, brunch spot kind of place, and then just on the other side of the highway is my market. Within 2 miles of downtown, so there's access to transportation, there's access to jobs down there, and it's an area that I saw was up and coming. So I'm between, so within 2 miles of me is downtown, Potawatomi Casino, Miller Park, and then like the cool hip areas. So I saw it as an area that had potential to increase rents, or to increase my purchase price. Right, and that's what I have witnessed. I bought my properties like between 2014 and 2015. Most of them gone up quite substantially in value, which is why I'm in this, I don't want to say predicament, because it's not really a problem, you know, but this situation of what to do is because a lot of them have had their values really increase. Do I sense the potential? Absolutely, they're doing a lot with Milwaukee downtown riverfront. So I was talking with, I think, Tara, earlier about Milwaukee. It is not, right, because everyone's different, right? Understand that your goals and your choices of being an investor are going to be different. So what I do does not necessarily make sense for everyone. But one of the challenges with Milwaukee, or any sort of C-type market, any market where the cash flow sounds great, right? If you're looking at stuff that they tell you it's going to be let's say an 8, 9, 10, 11% cap rate, right? Anything in that range, understand that that is a high-touch market, right? When I say high-touch, I mean you're going to have problems with tenants. It's going to happen, right? Trying to self-manage in a high-touch market is very hard if you have a daytime job, right? So with Milwaukee, we were talking about this earlier, understand that one of the reasons why I grew so fast was because A, I knew I was out of state, and B, I knew that it really came down to managers, right? Property managers will make or break your business. They will take an 8 cap, they will turn it into a 4, right? They can take a 6 cap and make it into an 8. Right? The 2 biggest expenses, your 2 biggest variables with landlording is vacancy and repairs, right? So those are 2 things that can be absolutely controlled by you or your property manager. If you've got a shitty property manager, right, they can really ruin your investment. So when I see 10 caps, usually it's a 10 cap on paper, is what I always say. It's not really realistic. That doesn't mean that's a 10 cap. It really comes down to the execution of things. So if you have a duplex in Milwaukee, right, because you think that that's a great market to invest in, invest where I invest, and I've got 100 units and we have the same property manager and we both have a vacancy, guess who's getting it rented out first? I am, absolutely I am. I'm 20% of my property manager's business for a reason, right? I made sure I chose a mid-sized company that I would be a big chunk of their business. What? Buying power, yeah. So I call, like, it doesn't happen very often, right? One of the things I've learned in business is I choose my favors wisely, right? There's times that they've fucked up, you know, like, hey, we placed this tenant and then like a week later they moved out, right? I don't give them shit for it, I really don't. But because I choose my favors very wisely with them. So if I call them and tell them they need to drop whatever they're doing and attend to what I need, they absolutely do that. You can't do that without scale. So to me, 20 units is scale. So I would not recommend for anyone looking, whether it's Milwaukee, anything out of state, anything again where you're seeing on paper 8, 9, 10 caps, you have to have, in my opinion, scale. And to me, that number is 20. I think with 20 that you're becoming important to the manager, right? For 20 units, they're going to give you somewhat of a priority. Yeah?
What was your sweet spot when you started investing in Milwaukee? Was it like 3 unit, 4 unit?
What was my sweet spot? That's a good question. So like I said, I knew going into it that I was going to buy at least 50 units, right? I had the capital sitting in my bank account to buy at least 50 units. Why did I choose? Actually, everything I own is pretty much 2 to 4s. I've got 1 6, everything else is 2 to 4 units. And that's for a reason. I think you need to understand every market's different and every market has their own housing stock, right? Housing stock is something that's actually really important. I actually just took a phone call today from a potential client talking about Rogers Park. I'm like, hey, Rogers Park is great. The problem though with Rogers Park is they're almost all larger buildings, right? Anything along the lakefront in Chicago, Uptown, Edgewater, they're all 20, 30 unit buildings. There's not a lot of 2 to 4 unit buildings. So if you're looking at house hack, it's actually quite hard because of the housing stock. So within Chicago and Milwaukee, I don't own anything above a 6 unit, even though I could afford to buy bigger buildings. So reason A was the housing stock in the neighborhoods that I chose, right? There was a large inventory of 2 to 4 units where I was seeing properties come up on a consistent basis that I had good numbers on them. That was one of the main reasons. Secondly, when I actually ran the numbers, right, comparing a duplex, let's talk about a duplex next to a 10 unit per se, okay? If we have the same 2-bedroom apartment, right, my duplex, your 10 unit, the rents are gonna be the same, right? You're not gonna get more money from your 10 unit than I'm gonna get from my 2. And that's not until you start having like the pools and the doorman and the Wi-Fi and all the gyms, like then you can start getting more rent for your unit than I can, right? So with these small multi-units, it's gonna be the equal to mine. Issue though is that I have city trash service. I pay residential water rates. I have residential insurance. You have to buy your own trash service and you have to pay for your own recycling. You also pay business rates for your insurance. You have to have common utilities and your water rates are higher. So when you look at it from an expense ratio, right, I'm actually getting a higher cap rate on my 2 unit than you're getting on your 10 because my expense ratios are lower and our rents are the same. So I've found, and I said I've analyzed, understand that what I do, I've analyzed every single property that's come in the market from Pilsen to Jefferson Park to Evanston over the last 8 years. I've run numbers on it. Everything from 2 units to 40 units I've run numbers on. I've found that until you're starting to get to like the 15, 20 unit range, then your expenses start balancing out to what I would pay in the small residential range. So that was one reason. It was more profitable for me to buy them. Second reason is my exit strategy, right? So like I said, I picked a neighborhood. I liked the neighborhood for a lot of reasons, but I felt that it was near opportunities for gentrification, right? It was near opportunities for growth. And that would mean people would be moving in for their own personal use. So this $120,000 property, right? No investor is gonna buy it. I can tell you that right now. Based on the numbers, it's not a good investment, but it's in a really great area across from the park, and it would be great for an owner-occupied. And so now the neighborhood's seeing a lot more owner-occupied buyers. So now I've got 2 different exit strategy opportunities as well. And that's also a risk too, right? Because my market with residential is dependent on what the comps are. With commercial, your comps are based on what the cap rate in the area is, right? And that does fluctuate. I think that the multifamily market is going to see a disruption in the market because we've been buying on 5 caps for so many years. It's just not sustainable. So that's going to be if there's going to be a real estate crash, per se. I see it happening in large-scale multifamily and self-storage. Those two areas of real estate are extremely trendy, have been for years. People are getting, like, their margins are really thin. People are taking out, 7-year interest-only loans on commercial assets just so they could cash flow, just a little bit. It's too risky for me. That was a really long answer to your question, sorry. See, this is why I take my calls back to back, right? Because you get me talking and it's like an all-day thing. What's up?
So since we're talking about Milwaukee, how much of your appreciation you saw there do you attribute to identifying a changing neighborhood, and how much to nationwide bull market real estate, and how do you choose the two?
So his question was, how much of the appreciation in Milwaukee is Chicago too? Do I see towards natural market progression? How much because of the area? So actually one of the things I forgot to mention with this, I had this economist look over everything that I've done, right? It was really eye-opening because he put all these different, his view of what was good and not good was a lot different than mine. But when we looked at, so I said, Milwaukee is considered a cash flow market. So I've spent equal money in both my portfolios. Right, so the cost it took me to acquire my Chicago properties is equal to the cost it took me to acquire my Milwaukee properties, within about 5%. So it made it a really good comparison point. Now, if you look at my cash flow annually, right, Milwaukee's like triple, right? It's hands down a lot better than my Chicago portfolio. But when you throw in the appreciation, what my portfolio is worth now, right, if you add that into the mix, so I'm taking my last, I've owned them all for 5 years, so 5 years is what we looked at. My last 5 years cash flow plus my appreciation, I've actually made double the money in Chicago than I ever did in Milwaukee because my appreciation is so much higher in Chicago. So the way I like to look at things is my monthly bills cannot be paid by my Chicago properties. It's just not realistic, right? Properties here are $500,000 plus, right? And they rent for, let's say, $4,000 a month rent, right? That's the gross. So Chicago to me is my long-term wealth appreciation, right, and my wealth gain. If I sold my Chicago properties right now, I can do a ton of investing with that money. If I were to sell my entire portfolio right now, my liquid would 2/3 would come from Chicago, and then 1/3 would actually come from Milwaukee of what I would take out of it. So it would actually take me about 15 years if my properties stop appreciating, then Milwaukee will be the same return overall as Chicago when I throw another 10 years of cash flow into it. I bought my properties at good times, so a lot of it has to do with the market going up, and a lot of it has to do with just gentrification overall. Whether it's Chicago or Milwaukee, both cities are we're seeing a lot of changes, right? With Chicago, our big problem here is we're decreasing density. So areas like Roscoe Village, Lincoln Square, right, east of Western, areas like Bucktown, Wicker Park, right, we're taking these small 2 to 4 unit buildings and we're making them into these single family mansions, right? That's the trend, that's always been the trend for the last couple of years. But what it's doing is it's decreasing the amount of housing units available, right? So renters are now they can't afford, right? They're not gonna be able to afford, $3,000 a month rent for a 2-bedroom in Wicker Park. Where are they gonna go, right? They're gonna go to the next neighborhood over, which is what happened in Logan Square. Now it's happening to Avondale, right? People talking about Avondale, 5 years ago, no one knew what Avondale was. It was not a word. And now everyone's like, ooh, hot, cool, Avondale. But that's what's happening throughout Chicago and Milwaukee, right? Is you gotta look at those sort of neighborhood issues of what's going on and where that trend is going. I remember I bought my first property in Albany Park almost 8 years ago. About 10 years ago, we had friends that bought a condo in Albany Park, and we were like, what the fuck is that? What's Albany Park? And that was where I bought my first property because I bought it in 2011, so I bought it after the crash, but I saw it was close to 2 Brown Line stops, it was close to a huge river park, it was close to 2 universities, and I saw that right before the crash, they had a program instituted with the aldermen where they would pay half the cost of updating your street signs. So there was improvements going on in the city, and I've almost doubled my property value in that property. My return, my cash on cash on that property is 400 and something%. If I were to sell it, right? That would be my IRR. So it's a lot of it it's a little bit of both. I would say maybe 2/3 market, 1/3 because of the neighborhoods that I bought in. You had a question?
Yeah, all of this sounds too personal, but I was curious, do you put each of your properties in its own series LLC, and also, how do you leverage your portfolio to work with banks and getting, lines of credit and stuff like that? how do you suggest someone starting out or looking for just a couple properties to do that?
Great. So the question was around LLCs, how they're set up and structured, right? So my Chicago properties are not in an LLC; they're in my personal name, right? It depends on financing. So at the time when you're doing an FHA loan, right, which is what I did to get my first property, that's a personal loan. That's a residential loan. Anything that's 30-year fixed has to be in your name, right? You can transfer to an LLC all day long. A, you've already pierced the veil, so you're still going to get sued. And B, your lender can make that whole loan due in 30 days. So that's really not a viable strategy. They've been in my name the entire time. I really don't have any issue with them being in my name. I'm not a slumlord. I follow the rules. I'm really not super concerned about getting sued. On top of that, I have got really good insurance and umbrella policy on top of that. Milwaukee, everything that I own is in one LLC. And then I've got 3 partners that I work with, and each of our partnerships are individually in different LLCs. As far as banks and leverage was the other question. So I haven't done, I mean, all my stuff is my initial acquisition loans, really. I haven't done any sort of, I've done like 1 cash out refinance on my personal residence. So really it was just, you know, they all require between 20 and 25% down. And, you know, building that relationship with commercial, it's a bit different than residential, understand that. They require there's the C's, credit, capability, but one of the C's is character, right? So they judge your ability to run a business on if you will get a loan or not. I got really lucky that I found a broker who put me in touch with US Bank, is who I work with. And I really hit it off with the guy. Then like the first 30 minutes, like he just got me. He got my plan, he knew what I was doing. And then I got really cocky, as I usually do, and I usually shoot myself in the foot. So I was at an event, I was bragging about my awesome lender. Like, man, my lender is the best, he gives me whatever I want. The next fucking day I get a phone call, I'm leaving the bank. I was like, fuck. Seriously, it was like the next day I was still like, this is what I gotta stop bragging about shit. But luckily, he gave me a new guy, and he had already talked me up. So I was like I'm about to write offers like this week on some properties. He's like, you're solid with this new guy. So understanding one of the most important things I did with US Bank, which is where most of my loans are through, was one of the first questions I asked them was, how do you underwrite? Right? He said commercial is a bit different than residential. So how are you deciding if my loan is going to be approved or not? Right? And so they look at things like DSCR, cap rate, right? How do you calculate those things, is what I asked them. You know, what sort of numbers are you using? Interestingly, they used something really weird. Like, I think they did like 10% in vacancy, which is fine, but they use like 3% property management, which like, I would love to pay 3% for property management. But that's how they ran their numbers. So when I was making offers, before I did that, I put it all through their calculator and like, hey, they will approve this, right? As long as I got the cash, they'll be solid with this deal. So that way when I would actually write, I would take about 5 offers at a time, or wait till I went under contract for 5 properties at a time. And I would tell them, hey, I'm buying 5 properties. And I would deliver everything that they needed, right? They needed 2 years tax returns, they needed rent rolls, they needed all this stuff. And I delivered it into their calculator as well. And my approvals would take about 3 days. So one of the things that my banker told me is like, man, your stuff approves like that. Because I delivered it in a way, right, that they understood it. And my stuff got approved, and they wanted to work with me more, right? They still want, like, that it's a great relationship. Especially with commercial. Commercial is really about the relationships. Residential, right, you can shop rates all you want all day long. They're all pretty much the same. You know, they're not really gonna vary too much. And it's based on your credit, your rate is based on your credit score. Any other questions? No? Yeah? Oh, the Getting Things Done was the name of the book. It's a really good organizational method. It really helps me focus. I liked it.
So it sounds like you did all the financing for your Milwaukee properties commercial.
Mm-hmm.
All your Chicago stuff is your personal mortgage.
Correct. Yep, the question was, my Chicago stuff's all personal mortgages, the Milwaukee stuff's are all commercial. I'll tell you the reason though. I'd rather all my stuff be residential. Residential is 30-year fixed, right? Commercial is a 5-year balloon. So my reset's coming up starting this July. So between then and now, what happens to the rates, right? So my rates went up a little bit. Back to how they underwrite. So like they gave me a 5% rate, but they actually underwrite me on 6.5%. because they're going to assume that it's a 25-year amortization. I need 5 different resets, right? They won't do anything more than 5 years. That's quite standard in commercial world. So over that 5 different loans I have to do with them, or with any bank, they're going to assume that my average rate's gonna be 6.5. So even though they're giving me 5% now, they're underwriting me at 6.5. So that's one of the downfalls of commercial, right? Is let's just say something happens and the rates go up to 9%, right? What the fuck am I gonna do? My loans are coming due in July. I have to reset. They're balloon payments. I have to pay them off or I have to refinance them. So that's the risk with commercial, is, you know, every 5 years you got your with what's going on in the market. And hey, if the market shifts and rates are 9%, you know, it's gonna cause people to not buy. And then how are you gonna sell those properties? So that's the difference between the two. There's other differences obviously as well. So I would much rather take a 30-year fixed, hands down. It just becomes a matter of, on the residential side, right, you can have up to 10 properties in your personal name, okay? The issue though is once you get to 5, you can no longer cash out refinance on anything you personally own. So I knew I had 3 in Chicago, I was buying a 4th, and I knew that my Chicago properties were appreciation plays, right? And that, like, if I keep going on the residential world, right, what happens if I want to cash out refinance? I can't. And then this money's gonna be sitting there with nothing for me to do with it. So where's my risk? And to me, the risk was a lot less by taking on that 5 year, and I knew I was gonna go over 10. Regardless, I knew I was gonna have more than 10. So either way, I had to go commercial at some point or another. Might as well just do it now. So that was my reasoning for doing it. But understanding, right, I think one of the most important things investors can do, especially when they're looking to grow, is understand financing, right? You have to have a really, really strong understanding of financing, right? Who here knows what DTI is? Yes, you have to know DTI. You have to know how to calculate DTI, right? Why is that important? Because guess what? That's like the #1 problem with investors once they get to 3, 4, 5 units, is how their DTI is calculated. You know, when I said that, I noticed you nodded. But things like, hey, once you get past 5 units, you have to have a certain credit score, and I think you have to have 30% down, no matter what. So these are all things that you need to plan for. You don't want to blindside yourself. I'm actually going through this right now where my LLC used to be 50-50 with my first husband. I bought him out when we got divorced, so now I'm 100% owner of my LLC. But now I cannot put those properties on my 1065, which means I have to put them on my Schedule E, which means when I go to apply for a loan, right, now they're like, well, now you've got, 21 properties. You can't buy anymore. You've reached your cap. I explained, no, 18 of these are on my business, because they're not on my credit report. So I had to literally show every single fucking lease. Every lease. All that, mind you, because in commercial they don't escrow anything either. So I had to show all 21 insurance bills every month, all 21 tax bills, all 21 mortgages, and then every single lease, right, and where that money was coming in from. It was the biggest pain in the ass. And if those are things like, if I would have known that, I would have given my new husband 1% of the business and kept it on that different return. I'm actually gonna probably go back and redo my taxes just because I don't wanna have to do this ever again, now that I'm buying another house. So those are things like, man, I just wasted legit probably 40 hours of my time on that one thing I didn't know. So understanding financing is incredibly important, guys.
If you're a newbie, does it make sense to exploit FHA loans as long as you can? In the same way that you would exploit employee match on your 401k?
Good question. So his question was, if you're a newbie, does it make sense to exploit FHA loans as long as you can? So there's 2 kinds of low money down program options to you. There's FHA and there's the conventional program. FHA is 3.5% down, conventional is 5% down. Apples to apples, the FHA program is more expensive. So they cost you more PMI per month, and they charge you a 1.75 upfront fee. So comparing the loan programs, like apples to apples, it's gonna cost you a lot more money to do FHA. So most people start the 5% down program. The program used to be only available if you currently did not own property. So I had clients who literally sold a condo at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we bought a 3-unit at noon, right? That's what we used to have to do. Now that's changed. But that program is only available in certain census tracts, right? So if you want to buy in Bucktown, it's just not going to happen. But you can do that multiple times, or you can do FHA as well. But FHA, you can only have one at a time. The only time that you can have multiple FHA loans is if you have what we call a qualifying event. So I think it's like a job transfer of over 200 miles, You add a dependent, right? There's things that can happen that can allow you to have a second FHA, but only if you have 15% equity in the property. So it's not like you could buy an FHA and then pop out a kid, and then next year do another FHA, you know, that doesn't work that way. And then once you're at an FHA, your PMI is forever. So if you're already at 15% equity, like, get it a little further to 20%, and then you can refinance and drop that PMI, because that's gonna kill you over the years.
So I was gonna ask, what would you suggest for like a newbie to, get started?
What would I suggest for a newbie? Awesome question. To me, the easiest way is house hacking, right? Again, it depends on the person. I always, if you're in your mid-30s and you've got 3 kids, right, living next to tenants in an apartment building is probably not what's going to be ideal. There's a fine line between personal sacrifice, right, and what your goals are. So some people would probably draw that line. But house hacking is buying a small 2 to 4 unit apartment building. Luckily in Chicago, they're everywhere. You can use FHA, you can use 5% down. You've got a lot of different loan options available to you. And then you live in 1 unit, you rent out the other units. It's a really easy, low-risk way to do it. Because A, your capital is not that high, right, if you're using low money down programs. And it also allows, usually it's an area that you want to personally live in, right? And I'd always tell people, if you want to live there, tenants want to live there, right? So you're going to attract the kind of tenants in the areas that you're buying in. If you're buying an area that you like, that your tenants are going to like, right? So when you're dealing with A, B type areas on the north side, right, you're generally dealing with a higher class tenant. You're not having issues with them, their car breaks down and now they can't pay rent, right? They usually have some sort of savings available. And it's an easy way to learn the foundations of landlording. So most people do that the first time. They usually do it again. Usually, I think almost 80% of our clients look to buy another unit within a year once they max out their occupancy requirements. Sometimes they do a third, but usually it's like the third or the fourth where they're like, okay, I've got my foundation set, right? I've maxed out my low money down options. Now I've got to put 20% down minimum, right? 20% if you're going to live there, 25% if you're not. With anything above 2 units, mandatory. So now you're looking at, like, man, for $600,000, right? I've got to save up 25%. Like, that's a lot of capital. It's a lot different than a 5% down loan program. And A, it's going to be years to get to that point, 1, and then B, even if I do save that kind of money, right, what kind of cash flow am I going to get continuing to buy in Chicago, right? And the answer is, again, what I faced too, was once we got after our third was, hey, if I want $10,000 gross rental income a month, like, I have to have $1 million cash to continue to do this in Chicago. Like, that's just, or I have to keep moving every year from house to house. Like, that's also probably not feasible. I'm getting to the point where this is getting to be really old. And that's where I find people look at other markets. So I said that's why I own my own brokerage company. We have a team, we're set up as a team for that reason. My market is, I deal with maybe 90% house hackers. But my other agents that deal with the South Side and the Cicero Berwyn areas, they don't deal with house hackers, right? So they deal with different kinds of investors who are looking for cash flow. So it's a great system for us that, like, once they get to that point, once people come to us and say, hey, do I do another house hack, my third, or what do I do? We're able to show them other options that are other markets. So that's what I find most people do. But house hacking, I mean, especially if, with the 5% down program, like, it's not that much money. It really helps you lay your foundation of and learning what kind of investor you want to be.
Can you do a 5% down if you're not living in the property?
No. If you're not living in the property, it's a mandatory 25% down.
How long do you have to live in the property before you can move out?
Question is, so if you do the 5% down, 20% down, or FHA all have a 1-year occupancy requirement. After 6 months, though, if you have a qualifying life event, if you got a dependent, or if you're upgrading. So if you're going from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, you can after 6 months. But you have to have the intention of living in the property for a year.
Fannie Mae has their home style program.
Yeah.
Put 5% down, invest in property, but single family only.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So yeah, he just said that Fannie Mae is a program where you can do 5% down and invest in property, but single family only. Just once, I'm assuming. You can't keep doing that.
It's for repairs too. It's very similar to what
Oh, the home style renovation loan.
home style renovation.
I thought that was only owner occupied. No?
No?
Oh,
You can do for investor, but it's only for single family.
cool. That's also an option, yeah. Well, good. Another question I always get is, what about these 203K renovation loans? So 203K renovation loans can be done in multi-units. The problem though I find with Chicago is that we're talking about 120-year-old plumbing systems. Old, like I've had 4 fall through in the last year and a half because the rehab budgets were over $300,000 and they have loan limits and we couldn't get the property low enough, right? Because in these sort of areas, even if you're buying something that's a total disaster, your minimum is $300 in my areas. And if it needs $300,000 of work and it's only a 2-flat, you're not reaching the loan limits of it, right? So I've had the last 4 I've tried to do have all fallen through. The cost of rehab is actually like incredibly, I've always thought I was really conservative, and every single time they've gone $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 over what I estimated it would cost to do. So it's a really hard program to do, just because of the inventory and the price points, at least in the areas I handle, it's almost impossible these days. Okay, any other questions? Yeah?
Has your investment strategy changed in the past year or so since you reached your stabilization and optimization phase?
Oh, good question. Has my investment strategy changed in the last year? It's actually changed from day one. My original plan was to buy 4 properties in Chicago. That was our goal. We're gonna buy 4 rental properties. Then the 5th would be our personal residence. And then we were just gonna use all the cash flow to pay them down aggressively. And after about 15 years, we would have all the properties free and clear. And that was gonna be the plan. But then I found something called Bigger Pockets. If you don't know what Bigger Pockets is, it's a real estate website. And it opened my eyes to all these different, I didn't know any of their strategies, right? I had never talked to another investor. I'd never read a book about investing. I didn't know about meetups. I was just thought like, oh, this is kind of like a little fun side project for me to do, and that's what I'm gonna do. And there was this whole world of wealth of information. And that's when I started getting a lot more aggressive with things. So my strategy, I don't really know my strategy currently is my problem. I'm definitely selling off my shitty performing properties. So I just sold 3, I've got 2 in the market just yesterday. But what to do with that capital, I do not know. And that was one of my questions was, do I pay the taxes on them? Take the tax hit? And I decided yes, I'm taking the tax hit on it because I don't want to just necessarily 1031. I think I'll just sell the non-performing ones and I'll figure it out. So that's one of the reasons why we had this event in June and why I like going to these events is we've got 400 investors coming. We've got about 35 speakers. Half are flying in from over the country to talk about what they do. And I always get really good ideas from these sort of events. So last year, that's how I got the idea to analyze my portfolio, right? Because everyone kept asking, what's the market doing? What are you gonna do? And the first question was, well, how's my portfolio actually performing, right? I don't know. Like I see numbers, obviously, right? And I do my own basic analysis. But now that I have, by June, I will have hopefully the majority of the ones I wanna dump sold. I'll have capital to invest. I'm really gonna use this event to learn about what other people are doing with their capital and where to potentially invest that. Any other questions? Oh, good question. The real estate brokerage. So why did I decide to do the real estate brokerage and someone managing to do that for me? So when I quit my job in 2014, I thought I'd be like a really chill person who just drinks coffee in a cafe at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, reads a book. I really did. I was like, man, I was telling someone so I quit my job, right? The next day I was recording a podcast for Bigger Pockets. And I went to lunch and I had 2 cocktails because that was just a big fuck you. It was a Wednesday. Like, fuck you, I can have cocktails on my lunch break now because I'm self-employed. I still like to have cocktails on my lunch break just because I can. I actually open a bottle of wine with my husband at lunch sometimes because I can. That's one of my personal awesome, this is awesome, things to do. But all the other businesses, I've started 4 companies since quitting my job. All of them came on accident, really. So I did not intend to be an agent. I'd actually been licensed at that point for about 10 years. I'd only done my own deals. And it wasn't until I was at a meetup event that this guy came up to me and said, I cannot find an agent that knows the investor side of things. I want to do exactly what you do, what you've done. But I've gone through 3 agents and they can't explain things to me. I ask them questions and they're like, let me get back to you, right? They don't know the answers to what's the CapEx, right? And he's like, it's getting really frustrating. Would you be my agent? And I was like, well, I can legally, right? I am licensed to do so. And then it just turned into like, I've got really nothing going on, right? I'm not really sitting in cafes like I thought I was going to. I don't have a car either, by the way. So you've got to actually come pick me up and drive me to all the showings, which he did. I was like, sure, like I can do this. And it actually turned into something I love to do. When we talked about, what I don't like to do and what I like understand what I do like to do. So I explained, once I own the property, I don't like dealing with tenants. I don't care about their bullshit, right? I really don't. It's a lot of stress for me. But what I do like, right, the crack to me is the analyzing the strategy, the strategizing the deals. So with being an agent, I get that fix, right? I get to analyze deals all day long. I get to strategize with clients about what to do, but I don't have to actually manage the properties. And I get paid to do it as well. So it works out really nice for me. But back in, I started being an agent in 2014 for clients. 2014 was like, nothing, like I took on a couple of clients. 2015, more people started coming up to me asking me to do it. But at the time, my focus was in Milwaukee. So my rule was I wouldn't take on more than 3 clients at a time. That's what my bandwidth would be able to hold. 3 wasn't that big of a deal, but I remember like driving back, I was up in Milwaukee every week, basically at least 1 or 2 nights a week I was up in Milwaukee. And like, when clients want to make offers, right, they never do it on your days off, or like when you're sitting in front of the office, right? It's always when you're in the middle of like a really hectic day. I think we pulled over the side of the road using my hotspot to like upload a DocuSign, right? Because I'm like, I'm not going to be near an office for like 6 hours and this offer has to go in. So 2015 was a really stressful year for me. And then I kind of reevaluated things in 2016. I was like, listen, I'm working a shit ton of hours, right? But where is my time being spent? And like, hey, I'm driving up to Milwaukee with this in-house property manager that I've got to babysit, right? He hands me literally pockets of receipts every month. I ask him who's paid rent. He's like, I don't know. Here's all the payments, and every month I'd drive to his house at Milwaukee and I would just go through all of his handwritten receipts and then put them into a system, be like, hey, so-and-so hasn't paid rent yet. He's like, oh shit, like I should probably get rent from them. I'm like, yeah, probably. That was our system, right? I'm like, this is not working. So I fired him at the end of 2016 and hired my current property manager. And then I decided, it took me as a control freak, right? It took me a while. First I was up there every month, right? Every month we had to have a meeting. Every month I had to go through all the reports. Then it became quarterly. And now, I saw them a little over a year ago. And that was only because they don't sell BB guns in Chicago, because the city liked the rules. My husband wanted an air rifle. So we had it shipped to my property manager in Wisconsin. So we went up there to go out for like a date weekend and picked up this air rifle. That's the only reason why I saw my property manager in the last year. So it was that system. And then that gave me time back to focus on what I like doing. And what I like doing is analyzing. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. So understand a couple of different things. He asked me what's my repair expenses between the 2 markets. With Chicago, the average rent is about $1,400, right? Milwaukee, the average rent is about $700, right? So it's a cash flow market, right? You're dealing with C-class tenants in C-class markets. So a toilet breaks, it costs the same thing in both markets, right? A roof needs to be replaced. It's the same cost in both markets, right? You don't pay for less on the toilet because it's a cheaper market. That's not how it works. So as a representative of my expenses, not including like taxes and, let's include taxes and insurance. My expenses in Chicago run about 15 to 20% of my total income. My expenses in Milwaukee are about 50 to 60%. So it's quite a drastic difference. And again, you're dealing with different tenant class. So we talked earlier, or you mentioned earlier about the landlord-tenant laws, right? Milwaukee is definitely a landlord-friendly area. Chicago is very tenant-friendly. So in Milwaukee, right, it's great. It cost me $96 to file for an eviction, okay? I file for an eviction, I get a court date within about 10 days. Once I file for an eviction, it automatically goes into their online court system, which is public access. So how landlords do screening is they put the person's name into CCAP, right? And if they've ever had an eviction filing, boom, they're done. So that's one of the great things about Milwaukee is if a tenant doesn't pay rent, they know this. Everyone knows this. So if they can't pay rent, instead of going through the actual eviction, they leave, right? I would say half of our tenants we don't even get to court with. We tell them, hey, we're gonna file eviction on you. You haven't paid rent, whatever it may be. understand, you can go look it up yourself. If you put your name into CCAP, it will show everything, like every speeding ticket you've ever had. So any new landlord is going to look you up in CCAP, right? If you leave the house broom clean condition, you move out in the next 48 hours, we will not file eviction, right? And 50% of them take that. Then the other half, we go file eviction, and about half of those before we even get to court decide to move out. Because we explain again, you've been served, you know, here's your serve, whatever, they get served. Let me explain the process. You know, so we're gonna go to court, and you can call, they've got tenant advocacy groups out there, they've got, you know, emergency assistance programs we also suggest. A lot of times, again, it's someone that, you know, if they've fallen on a little blip, and they've been with us for years, right, we're gonna work with them. But if they're consistently always paying late, or they're not returning our calls, we're absolutely gonna file eviction. So, you know, we give them options that they have, but once they go to court, they ask you one question. You, as a tenant, she says you owe X amount of dollars. Can you prove that's untrue? No, but they did. I don't give a fuck. Don't care. Bed bugs, rats, whatever, they do not care. You owe her money, end of story. They'll start yelling, you know, whatever, and the judge just looks at you and says, what do you want to do? And I'll say, I want you to evict. Great, here's your writ, take it to the sheriff. The sheriff will probably come tomorrow and move your shit on the front lawn. Not even kidding, they will move you out on Christmas Eve. But it takes about 24 to 48 hours for the sheriff to come and move your stuff out. So we explain this process to people. We haven't had to actually file an eviction in, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. Again, most people we work with, hey, let's work out a payment plan. But that's one of the great things about Milwaukee is they know that it's very landlord friendly. So why are you gonna go through all of that when they're just gonna come move your stuff on the front porch in the next 2 weeks? And now you're not gonna get anything with finding a new landlord. So even I've had 2 tenants currently that I evicted years and years ago who, you know, now they can't find places. They've got an eviction on their record. You know, and my response is great. If you can figure out a way to pay me back the back rent, then I can go to court and have that removed from your record. You know, but I want my back rent back, right? That's the only way that I'll do it. And I can have it dropped from your record, and they've never actually done that, right? But they call and they ask, because it's really hard to find it if you've already had an eviction. Like I said, but it's a different market where, you know, your car gets towed and you can't make it to work for 3 days. That's going to affect your ability to pay rent. And again, if it's communications given, right, and people come to you and, hey, this happened, I need a break, I need someone to work with me, fine, we'll do it. But it's when you don't say anything about it, and now we're having, like, now you're dodging me, right, and now we're the 21st of the month, and you're just, you know, you're avoiding my phone calls, then we're filing eviction, we're moving forward with it. I use Performance Asset Management. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
So, how do you, let's say you say you have properties in Ames, right?
Yeah.
Or in just these different locations, how do you manage to do that and just like, you know, buy the property and just do it all along? So you have the property manager, did you do that like day one?
So the question was, if you're buying in a like market, let's say Indy, Milwaukee, right? There's a bunch of different cash flow markets. How are you able to manage it? Like I said, I was up there at least 1 to 2 nights a week for the first year and a half, managing the portfolio. So even though I had a property manager from day one, it still required a lot of oversight. It was very good and very bad. Very bad because I became a control freak with the properties. But very good that I got to learn expenses, right? I learned a lot about the business. So even when my manager sends me a bill that they had to repair my furnace, right? I just had this happen not too long ago. But they went to go repair 3 different parts. And my response was, that's bullshit. Like either it was blowing cold air or it wasn't blowing air. But you replaced, like it sounds like you just started replacing shit until you couldn't figure out the problem, like until it started working. But I know that because I own over 100 furnaces, right? So those are things like it saved me money over time. But yeah, I mean, there's no way, like I said, that's what it comes down to even people who think that not working is delegating, right? They think that, you know, oh, this is gonna be easy and I can have this lifestyle, I'm trying to delegate, right? I've seen it happen a million times when people, they delegate everything, they've got no idea what's going on in their business. I've had it happen twice with managers in Milwaukee, actually, because this is my 5th manager. Twice where I've had to call the owners and be like, just so you know, your business is absolutely collapsing. I'm taking away my properties, your business is collapsing. I can guarantee you for the next 6 months, you're gonna go bankrupt. And here's why. And both times, they're like, holy shit, Like, this is because you're delegating, right? But you're not paying attention. You have no idea what's actually going on with your employees. You think that they're doing good because you like them, but you're actually not double checking their work. And I'm a big believer in not micromanaging, right? It's one of my personal policies. I hated being micromanaged, right? I don't like micromanaging, but I absolutely reserve the right to yell at you if you're not doing your damn job and fire you, right? That's my personal belief. Is, hey, if I'm hiring you to do a job, my expectation is that you do that job. I don't need to be checking on you every day to make sure you're doing your job, and if you're not, I will fire you. It's as simple as that. So, you know, understand that that's how I operate. But yeah, so I said, my property manager, at this point, we've been with them for 2.5 years. They don't really call me for shit, because it's like, what's the point, right? Great, my furnace broke. What am I gonna do about it? It needs to be fixed. And I can't control the cost of those things. Where I get involved in is when it's coming to like turning over units. Hey, if we redo the cabinets and the countertops, it's gonna cost you X, and we think your rent is gonna increase X, right? That's something I should be involved with, you know, but again, a tenant moved out and the pit needs to be repainted, or the carpet needs to be, like, stain the carpet. Don't call me on that stuff, because that needs to be done anyways. I can't rent out an apartment that's got chocolate pudding all over the walls, right, or stains in the carpet. Just do it. So that's taken, you know, it takes time to get to that point with them, where I don't feel the need to double check their work. It's very rare that we have to have one of those situations come up. But that's, again, allowed me time to do other things.
So if you've had that many property managers you've gone through, how do you go through to find a property manager?
Oh, it's awful. Man, finding property managers is like the worst thing ever. You know, they talk big game, right? It's really hard. It is really, really hard to find good property managers. Like I said, they will make or break your business. So I've fallen for the, you know, this, I like the idea of systems and processes, right? The last two that I had to fire, the ones that we're both talking about, I think that one actually closed his business about 2 weeks after I called him. But he had, you know, he was getting his doctorate at Princeton, I believe. He was getting some sort of advanced education at Princeton, but had a solid, reputable business, but decided to go to Princeton to further his education, and had people in place, right? And they always talk about systems and processes, and I love that, right? Because that all makes sense to me. But the reality is it wasn't being executed. Both times that I had that happen. Their game was awesome, their talk was awesome, it just wasn't being executed. There's no way to know that kind of stuff. You know, I always say, you know, when should you fire your property manager? The second you think you should fire your property manager, right? Like, that was my mistake. It was like, well, maybe, you know, maybe it will work out, right? It's like the guy who cheated on you. You know, like, oh, maybe he won't do it again. He's gonna do it again, right? Just cut your losses and move on. So that's been my mistake, because I wanted to be nice. Like I said, I liked them, they were smart business people, we had a connection, seemed like it was good, but it ended up both times I was like, fuck this. And I cost myself tens of thousands of dollars by not doing it sooner. And it's a huge pain in the ass moving properties over with property management. I hate it, I absolutely hate it. So that's what I said, my property manager now, you know, things that we've had rough patches, right? They've cost me money. You know, it's definitely not perfect. But at the end of the day, they've never done anything malicious. They've never lied to me. They've never been incompetent. And they've always had my best interest in mind, regardless if it was what I wanted to do or not, or if it cost me money or not. So I sleep at night knowing that they're managing my properties. And that's what I really base my, you know, decision off of. Yeah?
You said FHA 3.3.5% is more expensive than final convention because of PMI and what else?
Upfront mortgage insurance premium. So the question was, FHA is more expensive than the 5% down. So FHA has a 3.5% down payment, has a 1.75% upfront mortgage insurance premium. So in my area, that ranges from $8,000 to $12,000. And then they charge you about $75 a month PMI for every $100,000 you finance. Okay, the 5% down program does not have that upfront fee, so you're saving $8,000 to $10,000 right there. And then they charge about $50 a month for every $100,000 you finance. Also, FHA PMI is forever, and the 5% down drops off once you get to 78%, or if you do an appraisal, 80%. So the issue is, you know, once you actually pay it down to that 80%, what are the rates going to be? You know, if the rates go up to 6%, well, it's probably better to keep your 3.5%, 4% FHA loan and still throw away a couple $100 a month. Then to refinance the whole thing at a higher rate, it's gonna cost you more money. So you're playing with the market in the future. So again, when you're comparing the two, it's night and day difference to do 5% down. Isn't there? So the 5% down has an income limit in certain areas. So said if you're not going to be able to buy in Bucktown, Roscoe Village, anything like that with 5% down. But those areas also, everywhere in Chicago has loan limits. So there's FHA loan limits and there's conventional loan limits. In those sort of areas that have the 5% down, there's no way you could have put 5% down and still been under the loan limit anyways. Anything else? Awesome. Thanks, guys.